You know, Gorgub always was a strange one. Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer online action, and this is Boss Gorgub. He is the only orc in town, yes indeed. So this is kind of a fun army I've put together with the greenskins. We're going to be facing up against the Dwarfs. And this is the only orc in the entire army. Everything else is goblins, or of course squigs. But yeah, so we've got a major gobbo rush going on here. Let's go ahead and go through the army composition. Of course, the boss himself up on a wyvern, the only orc here to keep the gobbos in line. For the gobbos, we've got 4 units of regular goblins up to silver chevrons. They're going to be backed up by a squig. We've got another squig herd here in the center. We've got the 8-peak loonies as well as the warlord's boys also in the center, supported by a night goblin shaman. Out on the flanks we've got a unit of night goblins with a nasty skulker and the mirror on this flank as well. We've also got the night goblin archers here with the rusty airs in a nice tight pocket. We've also got the hammer of Gork rock lobber, of course. Also brought the T-Frabas, and yes, this was by choice. This was not a randomly generated army. I brought these guys mostly just for fun. And we've also got the Dirkit Squigs vanguarded out here in the corner. Unfortunately, they are vanguarded in the wrong corner, as the Dwarfs have deployed over on this side of the map. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Dowie army. He's got mostly longbeards, 4 longbeards out on the front with 1 longbeard in addition on each flank. 2 Corlers, 2 units of Slayers, 1 unit of Miners with blasting charges, a cannon, and the Gob Lobber. So pretty decent dwarf build overall. He's also got Thorgrim Grudgebearer for some melee attack support and some armor piercing damage. Or actually, Thorgrim doesn't have armor piercing? What? For some reason I totally thought he did. Well, I learned something new today. He's also got the High King and a Runesmith with some decent runes. Let's go ahead and take a look at his kit. He's got Master Rune of Stromney Redbeard for some additional melee attack buffs. He's got Wrath of Ruin, of course, Rune of Oath and Steel, and Rune of Negation. So, with all those buffs, these Longbeards are actually up to 50 melee attack. That's very impressive. 50 melee attack and 48 defense is some decent combat stats. Granted, they only have 32 weapon strength, and the armor piercing is relatively low at only 6. So against heavily armored units, they would struggle. Now, granted, I haven't really brought any heavily armored units. I've just brought a whole lot of gobbos. So these guys actually might do okay here. You know, with the melee attack buffs from Thorgrim and from the Runesmith, they could potentially hang on against these goblins. So we'll see how it goes. But for now, I'm just going to be riding around these T-Frabas here, taking some cannon shots, and they'll take a substantial amount of damage from this. It's a bit unfortunate for me, but the T-Frabas are only, what, like 600 gold, and I mean, I do have a full stack of 20 units, so to have these guys soak the fire rather than them, you know, trying to fire in at this Hammer of Gork, for example, it's a much better trade for me, because the Hammer of Gork can potentially do quite a bit of damage in this matchup. We're going to be hopefully pitching some rocks here on these Longbeards here in just a moment. Dirkit Squigs are moving around the side here, going to be taking a few goblobs to the face, but, you know, they'll be alright. We're going to move them into the forest and try and obscure line of sight so that they can't, you know, fire on them. The boss also is flying around in the flanks, trying to distract. Basically, all these units over here are mostly just to draw fire away from my advancing forces. That way the squigs and the, you know, granted, a lot of these night goblins aren't visible, but the squigs are visible, the regular goblins are visible, and this Hammer of Gork is visible. I don't want him shooting at any of those targets, so I'm trying to distract with these forces over here. You can see they actually do rout off the the T-Frabas. Very unfortunate, only 2 of those guys left, so very good play there. But these Dirkit Squigs have moved up into the forest here. My opponent's going to be bringing these miners with blasting charges around to try and get line of sight on them, so he can potentially fire on them. Now we've got the Hammer of Gork opening up on these Longbeards, doing some nice damage, and actually doing that nasty debuff. Let's go ahead and take a look, excuse me, at what that Discourage debuff does. So wait for these rocks to make contact. And actually, none of those actually made solid enough contact to trigger the buff, and the Goblob are actually routing away those squig herds because they have such poor leadership. But the goblins are getting in here. They're getting all kinds of nasty with their little shanks and shanking these Longbeards. Definitely a classic grudge match of goblins versus dwarfs, and can't wait to add Skaven to the mix, of course. But that's going to be a wonderful three-way battle. Many fun free-for-alls to be had, I'm sure. Warlord's boys are going to be getting in here, centering the armor of these Longbeards nicely and allowing the other troops to trade much more cost-effectively. Meanwhile, we're just collapsing with sheer weight of numbers right now. Itchy Nuisance being thrown in on this flank, along with the Gobblobber. We're going to be taking these guys these Longbeard stats down significantly. Combine that, of course, with the poison from the Night Goblins, and it's looking really, really rough for the Dwarfs at this point. He's going to tactical retreat and try and pull back some of his infantry, to form a more cohesive line. But at this point, he's going to have a tough time just because there's so many goblins on the field. You can see the Squig Hoppers getting a beautiful charge into these miners here, and also tying up this Hammer of Gork. Unfortunately, these Dragonback Slayers are responding, going to be getting into the Squigs and chopping them up in a relatively short order. These other Slayers are also just trying to find a home, trying to find some large units to, match up against. This unit of Longbeards here is routed off. These Quarrelers are being shanked by these nasty Skulkers, and they probably will be able to hold off the nasty Skulkers, given the support, especially with this Rune of Wrath and Ruin and so on. But they're definitely in for a tough time. These Longbeards here in the front losing fairly badly. We did bring in the boss here, trying to get some damage done on Thorgrim, but he's taking a bit of damage as well. Thorgrim can definitely dish some pain, so we're going to have to be careful here not to go too crazy. But Wog, stand your ground going through. Curse of Bad Moon being dropped. Didn't do a whole lot, but I did manage to get these archers with it. Yep, let's go ahead and take a look. So let's pause, because I just want to see. The Curse of the Bad Moon has historically not done a ton of damage, but now it's got a nice debuff. So if we go ahead and take a look, it's minus 30 armor, minus 34 melee attack, and minus 24% speed, so it's definitely decent. If you can get it cast against a big dwarf blob, then you could potentially sunder a lot of their armor and then use the goblins to, get some extra damage done. It'll help those non-armor piercing units deal more cost effectively with dwarfs. So, decided to bring that mostly just for fun and to see how it worked. My opponent didn't really deploy in a blocky enough formation for it to be wildly effective, but we did some work against those Quarrelers, helped center their armor, and those Night Goblins, stacking the Warlord's boys on top of that Curse of the Bad Moon definitely brought those guys down to only 20 armor, so I would say that's fairly effective. Over here, these guys taking fire from the Night Goblins and just continuously getting overwhelmed and surrounded just by sheer weight of numbers here. The Goblins are carrying the day, and although they don't have armor piercing, well, I guess the Skulkers do, but between the Squigs and the armor sundering units and all the other kind of auxiliary support, they're definitely able to carry the day against the Dwarfs. And yeah, it's going to be a tough time for the Dawi to come back from this one, so some blasting charges being thrown in here. The Dragonback Slayers as well, countercharging on the boss. This is very, very nice. If he was able to take out my war boss, the leadership of the Goblins would probably crumble. You can see a lot of my units are continuously routing and coming back, and that's one thing you've got to pay attention to if you're going to bring a mostly Goblin army, that you need to be on top of getting your troops back in the fight when they need to be back in the fight, because they will rout and rally frequently. So the T-Frobas have now rallied, getting a nice charge in on those miners, but now going to be pushing on through. And those miners just getting surrounded. Mostly it's just the Slayers at this point. Thorgrim and the Runesmith are continuing to hold out. The Runesmith is surrounded by the 8-peak loonies at this point. But Thorgrim has got his sights set on these bowmen here. So that's going to be a bit unfortunate. We're going to have to pull them away. But meanwhile, we're just mopping up the rest of the infantry fight. Slayers are still doing fairly effectively. We did have to screen because they were doing quite a bit of damage to the war boss, but we've popped his potion, so he's healed back up, and got these Night Goblins matched up on the Slayers. And with the poison and with their decent combat stats, the Night Goblins will actually do okay here. They'll definitely trade cost effectively, considering the Slayers cost quite a bit more. Even with the silver chevrons on the Night Goblins, the Slayers still cost substantially more. So the boss is just going around trying to terrify off any of these units that might be rallying. Meanwhile, Thorgrim's trying to come back to the fight, but he's now being poisoned and shot by the Rusty Arrows, and all these Gobbo missile units taking a ton of damage. So not too happy about that. No doubt writing this down in the book as he gets shot in the back. But 8-peak loonies, of course they're unbreakable, so they'll fight to the bitter end here against this Runesmith. But his leadership is not going to be too great. Probably going to break on army losses very shortly, just because the balance of power is starting to tip significantly in my favor. The Slayers are getting now surrounded and beaten down by lots and lots of goblins, so unfortunately not able to fulfill their Slayer oaths today. well, I guess they died in battle, but I don't know that it was necessarily a glorious death, you know, just being surrounded and circle beaten by goblins. Not exactly the most noble way to go, but very, very fun stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed the solo war boss build. Just been having a bit of fun with some different kind of builds and so on as we await the release of Total War Warhammer 2. Just kind of trying some different things out and mostly just playing for fun. But yeah, well played to my opponent. Hope you guys enjoyed watching that. I sure did enjoy playing it. Man, I absolutely love goblins. They're so hilarious, and you know, just you can bring so many of them, you know, for so cheap, and then they trade fairly cost effectively, you know, as long as the enemy doesn't have a lot of heavy shock cavalry, and of course the dwarfs don't have any cavalry, so very effective in that matchup. The solo war boss, you know, definitely a weird boy, definitely likes hanging out with the Gobboz, so that's perfectly fine. Gobboz apparently like his leadership. We were able to carry the day against the dwarves, so let's take a look. 88 kills on Night Goblins is really good, considering they're mostly against like Longbeards and so on. You know, kills being spread nicely across all my units. Of 60 kills and an experience chevron for this squig herd is very, very nice. My other mobile units didn't do a whole lot, the Durkit Squigs and the T-Frabas, but again, they were mostly just there to distract the missile fire at the beginning of the match. So well played to my opponent. Hope you guys enjoyed watching that. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. I'm keeping it coming with more every day, and more, of course, when Total War Warhammer 2 releases in just a few days. So stay tuned for more, and we'll see you next time.